भारत राजा और महाराजाओं का देश माना जाता था। इनकी रीति और रिवाज भारत की संस्कृति और परंपरा में एक अलग सा रंग भर देते हैं। आजादी के पश्चात परिवर्तन की बियार इन राज्यों की बदलती स्थिति में देखी जा सकती है और इसी की झलक हमें लेखिका उत्तरा चौहान की पुस्तक ब्लू ब्लड में देखने को मिलती है। ये पुस्तक 8 कहानियों का संग्रह है। एक आर्किटेक्ट और प्लानर लेखिका कैसे बनी?
Well, I was always very, very interested in books and in fiction and in creative writing. I remember enjoying creative writing very, very much in my grade 7 English class. In fact, my best friend from grade 2 recalls me telling her how I wanted to write a book, even though I don't actually remember that. So I was always interested in writing. But I suppose it got pushed further and further on the back burner as I went through university. I studied science. I was expected to take up a profession. And so I ended up studying architecture and urban planning. But my interest in fiction never waned. I continued to read, and it was in the early 90s when the new crop of Indian writers in English came up. I think probably my most favorite book from that period is Vikram Seth's A Suitable Boy. I was very, very interested in those books, and I suppose that is the moment when I began my writing.
हाल ही में उत्तरा को फ्रैंक ओ'कॉनर इंटरनेशनल शॉर्ट स्टोरी अवार्ड के लिए मनोनीत करा गया है। उनके बारे में चलिए और जानते हैं।
My parents come from North India. I came to Canada when I was 2 years old and grew up in Saskatchewan. But as a teenager, I moved back with my family to India and lived there for many, many years before relocating back to Canada as an adult. So I spent a great many years in India. I studied there, I worked there, and had the opportunity to visit a lot of former palaces and interact with a lot of former royals. And I suppose it was the palaces that got me fascinated with the notion of royalty. And I started to read widely and realized that most of the books on former royalty are in the pre-independence era, and most of them are in the non-fiction category, the memoirs, the biographies, histories. There's not a lot of fiction on former royals, and very, very, very few books on the post-independence era. So in that sense, it piqued my interest. And I don't think there's any collections of short stories on the subject. So in that sense, Blue Blood is fairly unique.
वो 14 साल की थीं जब वो वापस भारत जाकर रहने लगी। इस अनुभव के बारे में वो कहती हैं।
I obviously had an accent when I spoke English, and I couldn't speak Hindi very, very well. So it was very, very visible. And I remember all of the younger children during recess whispering, "Canadian eye, Canadian eye," you know. So it was a very, very interesting experience of integrating back into Indian society. You know, the way that immigrants integrate into Canadian society, I had to integrate back into Indian society. And at times it was hard because even though I looked like everybody else, I was clearly the outsider. So it was a challenge. But in retrospect, it was very, very enriching. As a result of that move, I speak 3 Indian languages apart from English and French.
A Model House उनकी प्रथम पुस्तक है। इसके बारे में उत्तरा का कहना है।
So A Model House is my first book. It's a novel. It follows the story, the journey of Nanda, Alaknanda, who is an Indian American, a young Indian American woman in search of her Indian roots. She goes back to India, and while she's there, she falls in love with a young architect named Raghu. Raghu is a young man who gets involved in a reconstruction project in a village that is torn apart by caste violence. And Nanda is kind of an observer to all of the goings-on in this project, which is very controversial. There's a manipulative NGO worker, there are politicians, and at the same time, while this is going on, Nanda discovers the diary of Raghu's deceased brother Shiva. Shiva was a unsung hero of the student-led Nav Nirman movement in 1974. He was a student leader and passed away, and she reads this diary and starts understanding about the politics of the 70s. So while observing the ups and downs of this very controversial reconstruction project and understanding the ups and downs of the Navnirman movement, she provides the reader this very unique insider-outsider perspective of Indian politics, the politics of change and the politics of development.
इस लेखिका और भारतीय राज परिवारों के बारे में हम और गहराई से जानेंगे अगले सप्ताह। फ्रैंक ओकॉनर इंटरनेशनल शॉर्ट स्टोरी अवार्ड के लिए मनोनीत उत्तरा चौहान हमें राज परिवारों के वर्तमान दिखाती हैं अपनी 8 कहानियों में, जो कि उन्हें सम्मिलित किया ब्लू ब्लड नामक पुस्तक में। अपनी पुस्तक ब्लू ब्लड के बारे में हमें बताइए और आपको कितना टाइम लगा इस पुस्तक को लिखने में?
बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम लगा। So I spent a great many years in India. I studied there, I worked there, and had the opportunity to visit a lot of former palaces and interact with a lot of former royals. And I suppose it was the palaces that got me fascinated with the notion of royalty. And I started to read widely and realized that most of the books on former royalty are in the pre-independence era, and most of them are in the non-fiction category, the memoirs, the biographies, histories. There's not a lot of fiction on former royals, and very, very, very few books on the post-independence era. So in that sense, it piqued my interest, and I don't think there's any collections of short stories. So in that sense, Blue Blood is fairly unique. So I didn't start with a premeditated plan about trying to cover all bases and trying to cover all kinds of royals. The broad theme was royalty, but what I've tried to do is create characters who show the same kind of, you know, human emotions that you and me have, even though that they were you know, there was pomp and splendor and power and wealth attached with their history. Today they are regular people doing regular jobs, trying to fit in. They rub shoulders with common people, and they have the same emotions and same struggles as you and I. They experience love, lust, greed, betrayal, all of these universal human emotions. The other thing I wanted to do was to describe how they're navigating that transition from the glory of their past to the reality of the present. And for some of them, it's easy, they're able to move on. For others, they're kind of still stuck in the past. You know, their history is what identifies them. And when they can't reconcile with being ordinary, some of them self-destruct. And you can see, for example, the characters of Surya in The Guest, or Arjun Singh in the story called The Double Life of an Indian Prince. There's a bit of self-destructive behavior in there when they can't reconcile with the reality of the present.
उत्तरा के किरदार हमें वर्तमान के राज्य घरानों से अवगत कराते हैं। आज के राज्य महल अर्जियां लिए जनता से नहीं बल्कि पर्यटकों से भरे होते हैं। कई राज परिवारों ने अपने महलों को हेरिटेज रिजॉर्ट बनाया है, एक कोशिश अपने अतीत से अपने वर्तमान को मिलाने की। कई लोगों ने प्रजातंत्र में अपना ताज उतार कर राजनीति के सफेद कुर्ता धारण कर लिया है। क्या महत्व रखते हैं ये लोग आज की जनता के लिए?
Well, they mean different things to different people. As I just said, the ones that have joined public, you know, got into public service or joined politics, most of them are very committed. I think the Indian middle class has respect for them, largely because the perception is that because they have their own wealth, they're less likely to be corrupt. They will be upright. They will do their job. So there's a lot of faith in that. Then there's others. For other people, you know, the fascination with royalty is eternal. It's, I think that's not just in the case of India, Canada. I mean, the recent visit of Kate and William is a case in point. There's this fascination with royalty. Today, some of the royals are celebrities in their own right. There's also a lot of commercialism and glamour attached with it. So for some people, they're celebrities. For some people, they are symbols of a bygone era. And for some people, you know, they're just people who are trying to move on and change with the times.
इंदिरा गांधी ने राज परिवारों की प्रिवी ऑफ पर्स बंद करा और 2009 में उनकी बहू सोनिया गांधी ने इन परिवारों से उनके शीर्षक या टाइटल ले लिए। राज परिवारों की भारत की इतिहास में महत्वपूर्ण स्थान है, किंतु क्या वर्तमान के प्रजातंत्र में इनकी कोई मान्यता या महत्वता है? इन परिवारों के वर्तमान की झलक आप देख सकते हैं उत्तरा की पुस्तक ब्लू ब्लड में।